ready, go.
Thank you, Ellen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to start by thanking Ranking Member Stauber and our committee members for joining us today for this important virtual forum. I'm pleased that we've been able to continue to work together and be a powerful voice for America's small businesses who are facing one of their most difficult challenges. On March 27th, the CARES Act was signed into law. That legislation included a version of the Continuity of Business Operations Support Act, a bill I authored and provided $192 million in new funding to small business development centers. For those of you listening who don't know, we commonly refer to those as SBDCs, in order to meet additional demands for counseling, advice, training, and education free of cost for small businesses and entrepreneurs during this pandemic and recession. With 62 lead centers and over 900 subcenters across the country, including 11 in Maine's 2nd District, SBDCs are well situated to help small businesses navigate the COVID-19 pandemic and prepare them for the new reality of post-pandemic life. SBDC services are nearly all cost-free, which could not be more important for so many small businesses who can't afford additional expenses right now, but are in need of expert advice and assistance. In the past 2 years alone, Maine SBDC supported over 3,000 existing businesses, helped create 269 new businesses, and helped produce and protect 1,400 jobs. As we've heard in previous virtual forums, SBDC services are in far greater demand because of the coronavirus recession. America's SBDCs estimate that they have already done the equivalent of an entire year's work in just a few months, as they help small businesses fight to stay alive and maintain jobs in a damaged economy. I'd like to commend the SBDCs throughout the country and their association for their tireless work and commitment to helping small business clients survive this pandemic. Moving forward, my colleagues and I will remain focused on addressing the challenges small businesses and entrepreneurs face as we transition into phased reopening in a new post-COVID reality. As we approach the warmer months, seasonal businesses in my district that rely on visitors on vacation are growing more and more concerned. In Maine, there's a 14-day quarantine period in place for out-of-state visitors, threatening to deter the usual influx of travel and cash into these communities. From a practical perspective, the quarantine period seems difficult to enforce, and small businesses can't be expected to police their customers to the point of knowing where they came from and how long they've been in town. But they can take steps to change operations or make physical improvements to increase safety, and they would greatly benefit from the assistance of SBDC professionals as they grapple with these challenges. Whether or not the quarantine period remains in effect, seasonal businesses must be able, all businesses actually, must be able to adapt, because even if we reopen our economy entirely tomorrow, it will take longer to recover than you and I wish to be the case. I believe SBDCs are well positioned and highly capable of helping small business owners navigate these uncharted waters. Last September, I introduced HR 4406, the Small Business Development Center Improvement Act 2019, and it passed the House on October 21st with a strong bipartisan 375 votes in favor. This bill would reauthorize the SBDC program through fiscal year 2023 with more resources, and among other things, would bring SBDC services to more small businesses by explicitly allowing them to better market and promote themselves so that more business owners are aware of the services that they provide. And I think that's a key. They provide a great service, but if you don't know that service is out there for you and that it's low cost or no cost, then there's just too many small business owners that are missing out on a great opportunity to get some great advice and help. It's so important to reauthorize these programs and ensure SBDCs get the funding and capabilities they need to help American small businesses. I'd like to ask Ranking Member Stauber to join me in working together, as we often have on this subcommittee, to send a letter to the Senate urging it to approve this bipartisan bill and give SBDCs the tools they need to continue assisting small businesses to survive and recover from this pandemic and the economic disaster it has brought with it. And I hope all of our colleagues on the committee would join us in taking this action. I look forward to hearing today how SBDCs are equipped to guide small business owners through the phased reopening and what the future might look like for their small business clients. With that said, I'd like to recognize our ranking member, Mr. Stauber, for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Chair Golden, for hosting today's virtual forum. And you have my commitment. I will sign that letter. It's an opportunity, and I hope we have more signatures, but you have my commitment on that. You know, throughout this unprecedented time in our history, it has been an honor to be a member of this committee where we continuously work in a bipartisan manner for Main Street America. The Small Business Development Centers program is the largest of the SBA's entrepreneurial development programs, with locations in all 50 states and 4 territories. In fiscal year 2018, more than 250,000 clients across the country received low-cost training, and nearly 200,000 received no-cost business consulting. In the great state of Minnesota, SBDC clients created 173 new small businesses, accessed $153 million in new capital investments, created or saved more than 5,700 jobs, and grew revenues by more than $20 million in 2019 alone. And as we know now, many small businesses have missed out on the initial Paycheck Protection Program funds because of low baseline awareness and differential access to that information. And I am proud of this committee's efforts to increase partnerships with SBA resource partners, including SBDCs, in order to address this information. Yet more can and will be done. As this committee continues to work on legislation such as Chairman Golden and Ms. Radewagen's bill, the Small Business Development Centers Improvement Act that the House passed earlier this year, we must ensure that the American tax dollars are being put to very good use and that the SBA's resource partners are effectively increasing access to information for our small businesses. And I appreciate the feedback collected from SBA's resource partners, and I appreciate the representatives here virtually today. And I look forward to hearing from you all on how you feel we can address this information gap and provide the best assistance to small businesses as they prepare for this recovery. And a big thank you to you and your organization's employees and volunteers for their dedication to America's small business. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Stauber. Now, I'd like to take a moment to explain how this forum will proceed. Each panelist will have 5 minutes to provide a statement, and each committee member 5 minutes for questions. Please ensure that your microphone is muted when you are not speaking and that it is turned on when you begin speaking. Your time will not start until your microphone is active. So don't worry if that happens to you. It happens almost every time. And I may be guilty of it myself right now. I'd also like to thank our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to join us. With us today, we have Mr. T. Rowe, President and CEO of America's SBDC. Mr. Rowe has been with America's SBDC since 2009, and in that time has overseen a network of nearly 1,000 centers that provide low-cost training and counseling to small businesses nationwide. Mr. Rowe has been an invaluable resource to the committee in the past. We're happy to welcome him here again today. Mr. Mark Delisle, the State Director of Maine's SBDC program. Mr. Delisle has served as the Maine SBDC State Director since 2008. He brings with him a wealth of knowledge as a previous small business owner himself, and we're pleased to have him participate in this forum today, as well as I look forward to doing a teletown hall with him tonight, where we'll be connecting with small business owners all over the state of Maine, similar to one that we did just a few weeks ago, where he was able to really provide some great advice to business owners calling in back in my home state of Maine. Now, real quickly, because I seem to have lost a page, I apologize. I'll come back to them because they're two great people joining us from my district in Farmington, Maine. I'm going to defer to Ranking Member Stauber to introduce our panelists today from Minnesota.
Thank you very much, Chair Golden. And our final panelist today is Mr. Bruce Strong. He's the State Director for the Minnesota Small Business Development Centers Network. Mr. Strong has held positions in community and economic development for more than 20 years, including work with the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development and the Minnesota Housing Finance Agency. He has also worked 10 years in the private sector in mortgage lending and finance. He served as the National Underwriting Manager for Guarantee Residential Bank and Vice President of Product Development for Citizens State Bank. He is a proud Air Force veteran and holds a business degree from National College. It is great to see you again, Bruce, and thank you for your service, and thanks for being here today representing the SBDCs of our great state of Minnesota. Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Thank you. Now, one of the nice things about these virtual forums is normally when I was missing a page in my binder, I'd be in a lot of trouble. However, I could just pull up my original statement right here in front of me. So, Mr. Joe Musumachi, and you're going to have to help me make sure I get that pronunciation down packed by the end of this. And Miss Mary Elms, co-owners of the Escape Room at Farmington Underground in Farmington, Maine. I'm very happy to have your perspective as a small business in my district today and an SBDC client. I've heard already a little bit of some of the changes that you've made and ways that you've gotten creative in order to enable yourselves to continue to operate, perhaps at a limited basis, but nevertheless to have some success in continuing to serve your clients in your community. And I think, by the way, it's really important that you have been able to do that as people are going through lockdowns and looking really for things to be able to do. I'm sure that for your pre-existing clients, it's been great to continue to use and be a part of your business. But also, I hope and suspect that you've seen some new people come in the door as well as they look for new ways to be involved in their community. And I just can't wait to hear the story about how you worked with the SBDCs in Maine to get a little bit of help in the last several weeks. So thank you for joining us. Now, we've already gone ahead and heard from Mr. Stauber. So I would thank you all once again for joining us. And I'd like to begin now by recognizing Mr. Rowe for his 5 minutes for an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chairman Golden, Ranking Member Stauber. Can everybody hear me all right? I just want to make sure. We at SBDCs are working hard and facing a rapidly changing situation. As you know, we operate, I think I mentioned this at the previous forum, we're operating now on a 4R system: response, recovery, resilience, and reinvention. And we're moving now into the response phase, or out of the response phase and into the recovery phase. And a lot of our small business owners are facing massive uncertainties. There's uncertainty about the PPP loan forgiveness rules. There are uncertainties about whether their customers will be coming back and when they'll be coming back. And they're wondering about the best ways to keep their employees and their customers safe as they reopen. And can they avail themselves of testing kits and PPE? And lastly, what their liability is. Where do their responsibilities begin and end in reopening and keeping people safe? Now, to help with this, SBDCs are hiring additional advisors. They got their funding from the CARES Act funding that we greatly appreciate because, as you mentioned, the workload has been enormous and it's going to continue on for some time. They're developing reopening guidelines, worksheets, and decision trees to help businesses make the best decisions as they reopen. And they're working with innovative businesses. Now, I'm familiar with your constituents there in Maine, but I'd like to throw out some businesses in Iowa that actually have set up an amazing shopiowa.com website they're building that will help the local folks shop where they live, let them know who's open, what the conditions are, and where they can go. And that's something we're hoping to share nationwide so that small businesses, Main Street, can really have the customers come back with the feeling that, hey, everything's good, they're safe, we're following the rules. The other side of this, at our association, we're building up the web platform. The information hub that we received the grant for is up and running, and we'd encourage as many small businesses as possible. Please tell your constituents, go to covid-sb.org. It's all the federal information. Nobody's selling you anything. It's just the straight dope. We've got an artificial intelligence chatbot, and the more it's used, the more it learns. So we're hoping that function is really going to be helpful. And it also contains a geolocator so you can find SBDC, Women's Business Center, SCORE, DBOC resources wherever you live. Now, just the last thing to finish up is I'd like to talk about what we think Congress could do. First off, the Tpp Improvements Act. I think small business desperately need these changes. They need certainty in their situation, and they need flexibility as well. And those provisions that were in the HEROES Act, and I know that there's a bill working in the Senate, and I believe Congressman Roy has a bill standalone in the House. That's vital to small business right now. The other thing is, I would ask that you consider looking at tax credits for reopening businesses, tax credits for the expenses of PPE, shields, redoing their workspaces. All of that is going to cost them money, and I think a tax credits would be a helpful concept. And the last thing is the SBDC Improvements Act. We've got needs to update our operations and operate our operating relationship with SBA. And the SBDC Improvements Act would really help with that. So we'd encourage you to move that along if at all possible. This is going to be a long-term situation. I think we all need to think about it that way. We need to think about the long-term effects and what we can do. With that, I will finish up. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowe. I appreciate that. And I would, very quickly point out that we just now voted in the House on a bill to make some of these changes to the PPP program that you were just speaking about, including changing the 75-25 rule to 60-40. I believe expanding the period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, expanding the program through the end of 2020, among other important changes, many of which were pushed by this committee and talked about in virtual forums held by my colleagues in the chair and ranking member, both of whom are with us today. And that was a good, strong bipartisan vote that we just had in the House on this. So thank you again, Mr. Rowe, and I would now recognize Mr. Delisle for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair Golden, our ranking member Stauber, and members of the committee. Can everybody hear me okay? Good. Thank you for inviting me to be on today's forum. I really appreciate it to give you a little perspective about what's going on with SBDCs, both in Maine and around the country. I'm glad to be joined by my colleague, Bruce Strong from Minnesota, and really helpful. Really happy to have Joe and Mary here from the state of Maine talk about their experience as well. And I won't try his last name either, Congressman. We'll let him do that himself. So I'll give you a preview. They run an escape room, which I don't imagine it could be worse for social distancing, right? You know, we all have to be kind of closed in an escape room. So it'll be interesting to hear how they've adapted that model. I just want to make a couple brief comments. I'd love to hear questions. First I want to start with just a thank you to Congressman Golden, Chair Golden, and the committee as a whole for two things. One is your support of the CARES Act and the additional funding for the SBDC program across the country. It is critical. It's critical for the state of Maine. Certainly, Congressman Golden understands that. We are ramping up our capacity. We have new hiring going on for advisors. We're bringing in some specialists. We're doing a lot of work on our web environment to provide more and more resources for our small businesses, really laser focus right now, frankly, on small businesses and helping them relaunch and recover. The Congressman mentioned a 14-day quarantine, which is very, very challenging right now for our small businesses to try to operate in. The governor is taking a very cautious approach from a public health standpoint. So we're trying to work with clients all over the state to try to make sure that they can recover and reopen. We have 147,000 small businesses across the state of Maine. It's a small business state, as are a lot of our other states. And it's really critical that we have as many of them recover and sustain themselves after this crisis as possible. So I appreciate the committee's support in that additional funding, and frankly, also allowing additional marketing dollars to be used from that funding. 5% of that funding is allowed for marketing. And as Chair Golden said, that's an important measure for us to get the word out about what these resources are for people across our state and across the country. I'd also like to thank Chair Golden and the committee for their support of the reauthorization of the SBDC program prior to all of this happening. It is critical to the program, and we've had a conversation where I think it's going to be even more critical that the Senate pick that up and pass that, so that when we start reaching the end of our supplemental funding, we can talk about how we can really look to maintain that capacity, because it would be a shame for all of our programs, certainly in Maine, to start to scale back the resources to small businesses, because I don't think this issue is going to go away anytime soon. A couple quick thoughts on where we've been, and Chair Golden mentioned that we've done a year's worth of work in 2.5 or 3 months, and that's been true in Maine, and I'm sure Bruce would say that from Minnesota and my other colleagues around the country. We've seen over 1,340 clients just since March 1st. We normally see 1,500 a year. We've done almost 3,000 hours of advising. But most importantly, I pulled out the capital that we've helped people access through this window from March 1st till now. And it's close to $10 million in capital just in the state of Maine to help sustain themselves through this. And I'm sure of interest to this committee would be 4.8 million of that is PPP funding throughout the state of Maine. And 1.4 million of that is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program through the state of Maine. And those are significant numbers. And it really is a testament to this committee's work, Congress's work to get these programs up, running, and out the door fast. We were able to mobilize our resources very, very quickly moving forward. And we got a lot of that funding in the hands of small businesses. But as we said just briefly, T. Rowe just said, improvements to the PPP are going to be critical. It doesn't fit for all of our clients. A lot of clients are really concerned about the forgiveness process, and that's still bogged down with Treasury and SBA, as you know. So getting that clarified is going to be critical. So it's going to be important that we make those improvements. But looking forward, certainly things that Congress and this committee can take up are things like funding for PPE. That's an unknown that just kind of came on our clients recently, trying to reopen with enhanced safety guidelines, et cetera, and lost revenue. Frankly, they're going to live with probably some level of reduced revenue for a 12 to 18 month window would be what we're forecasting for most small businesses. So any resources that can be available to help clients through that window is going to be very, very important for what we're doing in Maine. And with that, again, I thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Mark. Now we're going to go ahead and have opening remarks by Mr. Masumachi. I know you're going to try and correct me, Joe, and Ms. Elms. And let me just say, this is the first time I've seen a panel where we have two people testifying together, and I think that's great, and maybe something that we can consider in the future, even once we get beyond virtual hearings where we've got two co-owners testifying together. it's an important perspective. So thanks again, and look forward to hearing your remarks.
Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, awesome. Not that I'm going to try to correct you, Congressman Golden, at all. If you wanted to know, it's Musa Mechi, but just Joe is good enough with me. So yes, my name is Joe Musa Mechi.
I'm Mary Elms. We're the co-owners of Farmington Underground Escape Room. It's in Farmington, Maine, which is in Maine's 2nd Congressional District, as you already said. For those of you who aren't familiar with escape rooms, they are a type of indoor entertainment where you're going to be entering a room and solving puzzles or finding clues to try to figure out a mystery. Each room that we design has a story that goes along with it. So each escape room can have a different and creative theme. What we've come up with so far are themes like time travel and history, medieval dragons, and we even have a dinosaur theme park room right now. So with a team of people, sometimes friends or families or coworkers, you would go into the room and use communication and teamwork skills in order to be successful.
So we opened our escape room business in March 2018, and we just closed it before our 2nd anniversary. For the past 2.5 months, we've been closed and the shutdown. It's unclear when exactly we'll be allowed to open back up. Escape rooms are usually not named in official state guidelines for reopening. We're kind of in a hybrid category. It is an entertainment for groups of people, yes, but it can also be for small private groups, usually families or just people who know each other, and they have to make reservations beforehand. So our average group size is usually around 4 people.
So when we were trying to think about new ideas and get a little more creative here during the shutdown, it was always our mission to think locally. Having this business in a small rural town with a population of about 8,000 people, we wanted to give back to the community as much as possible. So what we're doing currently is we've pivoted our business in a way that we're offering now outdoor entertainment in the same vein as an indoor escape room. We are partnering with local historical societies, with local theaters and other civic organizations. And so we're working here in Farmington and in a few other nearby small towns to create outdoor treasure hunts that are using local landmarks.
In these treasure hunts, groups of 2 or a small household group of people receive clues and a map of their downtown area, and then they walk around solving puzzles at different locations. This approach utilizes the teamwork and puzzles from escape rooms, while also taking into consideration social distancing and safety guidelines. So we could have taken a more approach to virtual type entertainment, but we like the idea of getting people more connected to their towns outside and learning about buildings and monuments, things that are already there that seem to go overlooked. So your question today, yes, is how has the Small Business Development Center been able to help us? Well, I can tell you that it's only been a few months since we've been working and had a business advisor, and now we're making a statement to a U.S. House of Representatives subcommittee, so that's pretty cool, I gotta say. I didn't see that one coming at all. So I can tell you that we have attended webinars and talks that the Small Business Development Center has offered, and the connections, professional networking, advertising have all been really helpful things for us so far.
And we are first-time business owners. We've spent the past couple of years really problem solving and trying to figure out every little problem as it comes along. And now that we have a business advisor, we really are seeing the value of having somebody that we can talk to for advice, somebody who will get to know our business and somebody who gets to know us personally. Our business advisor walked us through the SBA loan process and then discussed solutions to manage our cash flow in the meantime. And we're really hoping to now leverage these connections with the Small Business Development Center to expand our business while also keeping our roots local and serving these small communities here in Maine. So thanks for your time, and we look forward to your questions.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. I look forward to continuing the conversation. And Farmington is just such a great town. I think you probably know I spent some time early after high school there prior to joining the Marines after 9/11, and it's just a great community. I love it very much. To close out the opening remarks from the panel, let me give 5 minutes to Mr. Strong.
Thank you, Chairman Golden, for your support and for hosting this virtual forum today. Thanks also to Ranking Member Stauber from the great state of Minnesota. I was actually asked to be part of this forum at his invitation, so again, sir, thank you very much. I'd also like to recognize Nydia Velasquez, Chairwoman of the House Small Business Committee, and Ranking Member Steve Shabbat for their many years of service and tireless support of small businesses throughout the country. As mentioned, my name is Bruce Strong, and I'm the State Director of the Minnesota SBDC. The Minnesota SBDC has been operating for more than 40 years and has provided more than 935,000 consulting hours to 90,000 plus clients during that time. Some of those clients went on to start more than 5,000 new businesses, and many more operate existing businesses. We've also helped them secure more than $3.2 billion in new business capital. Despite our best efforts, however, we are currently in very real jeopardy of losing thousands of Minnesota small businesses alone to the COVID crisis. There has never been a time when the services of the SBDC have been more timely and important. The SBDC immediately stepped into the fray by helping hundreds of businesses owners apply for the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan and the Paycheck Protection Program. And like every other state, Minnesota is now carefully trying to balance the health implications of the disease and protecting our citizens with the need to restart the economy and reopen businesses. The SBDC will continue to be right alongside those companies, providing assistance to them to help respond, recover, reinvent, and build resiliency. I'm proud to say that Minnesota businesses have taken the global lead in responding to the pandemic. We've all heard about the wonderful work being done by 3M, Medtronic, Mayo Clinic, and United Healthcare. But you may not have heard about the hundreds of small Minnesota businesses that have completely turned their companies upside down and inside out in the blink of an eye to address urgent needs stemming from the pandemic. I'd like to highlight just 3 of those businesses for you now. All 3 of them are SBDC clients. Joel Vickery and his wife Emily began Vickery Distillery with the help of the SBDC back in 2015. They distill handcrafted aquavit, gin, vodka, and other products in Duluth's Canal Park area. Vickery was impacted not only by the closure of their own cocktail room, but by the closure of all bars and restaurants to whom they sell. But when they heard that healthcare providers and homeless shelters in the area were running out of hand sanitizer, they realized the alcohol they distill is an important ingredient and kicked into high gear. They set to work quickly learning the correct recipe from the CDC and then began production. Vickery gives away the disinfectant free to anyone who asks, and they're giving the donations that come in to the 18 employees they had to furlough when they were forced to close the cocktail room. Also in Duluth, Frost River Trading Company, a manufacturer renowned for high-quality custom leather luggage, handbags, and outdoor gear, is shifting its production to personal protective equipment. For owner Christian Benson, there's a personal dimension in the move in that his wife, Andrea, is an anesthesiologist at Duluth St. Luke's Hospital, so she's very definitely on the front line. Benson has purchased 24 new sewing machines and hired 53 college kids who had little prospect for other part-time summer work this year to make masks out of surgical wrap so they are cleanable and reusable. They're currently making 6,000 masks per day. Another small Minneapolis manufacturer, Woodchuck USA, also heeded the call for help. Founder and chairman Benjamin Vanden Weyen-Millenberg said Woodchuck's laser cutting machines typically used to make a variety of custom wood products, including custom wood notebooks and journals, phone cases, luggage tags, and the like, are well suited to make the plastic face shields needed by medical professionals. They formed a new partnership with 3M Company and have been named a 3M preferred converter, a status achieved only by 1% of 3M's partners. But that partnership has allowed their production to increase to a staggering 250,000 face shields per day, more than 4 million to date and counting. I shared renewed work in the American worker demonstrated by these companies, and I thank you for your time today and welcome any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Strong. And let me say, this was the best panel I've ever had in regards to being like right on that 5-minute mark. I think you all came prepared. Super impressed. And thank you for that. So we're going to go to questions. I'll start by recognizing myself for 5 minutes. I'm going to give an opportunity for Joe and Mary here to continue to elaborate a little bit further. I'm interested. I know that you've started to shift outdoors. You know, state would allow you to have up to like 10 people in a gathering right now. June 1, that's going to change to 50. So I just want to hear more about your plans for the future and next steps and how you might continue to work with the SBDC to assist you with that planning.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that question. Well, we're kind of changing plans, I guess, day by day as it goes forward. We'd like to open back up our indoor escape room eventually at some point when we feel like it's safe and the risks are not there for people. We're looking, so I think someone mentioned PPE equipment and the availability of that. And that is definitely something at the top of our minds about how do we secure that and enough of it in a way that we can keep people safe when they're inside. So for the foreseeable future, I guess we're moving towards the outdoor stuff with just in the back of our mind, keeping to check the guidelines about when we can bring people back inside. It's like I said, it's a little tough because escape rooms fall into a weird category. And so we'll be working with our advisor, Allison Lee, at the SBDC, to kind of figure out when our category comes up, whether it's June 1st or whether we might have to wait a little longer to see. So she's been kind of our liaison on giving us all that information to help us figure out those different aspects.
And regarding the outdoor treasure hunts, we started right here in Farmington and spent some time developing that. And people were really excited about it. They were really eager to get outside once winter finally ended here. And so we had a lot of interest in it. And we then expanded it to the next town over, Wilton. And that one is almost done. We're hoping to finish that one this week and get that up and running. And then we had interest from people in Dover Foxcroft, which is an hour and a half away. But they had a big bicentennial committee that was planning events this summer that have all been canceled. And they heard about what we were doing and asked if we would try to do it there. So we're now working on a Dover Foxcroft plan as well. And then our advisor, Allison, was just suggesting another town for us in Penobscot County to try to do this with. So it could expand quite a lot if we keep going this way and if the weather keeps being nice.
Yes, that's the one thing. Yes. Thank you.
Well, that's great. It sounds like they're helping you really get the most out of getting the word out about what you're doing and helping you expand to other communities. Dover Foxcroft is quite a drive. I've got 2 minutes left, and I wanted to ask Mr. Delisle and Mr. Rowe. We can start with Mr. Delisle. In your opinion, I mentioned in my opening statement that there's just a lot of businesses out there that haven't heard of you yet, and we want to do something about that. So how, what more could you do if we were able to get you the reauthorization and additional funding to help with that marketing outreach?
Great, thank you for that question. And we've talked about this before, Congressman. It's a balancing act about how much we want to promote our services and programs, since they're all free of charge to the clients, which is great. But we have to balance the demand with that promotion aspect. But with this additional funding, we really have kind of been released from that to some degree, because I've got the resources now. I want as many small businesses to know about us and to get in to see an advisor similar to Joe and Mary. I want to make sure that they're getting that help to look at their cash flows, price things out, figure out how to change their business model. We are in Maine, we're doing a lot of digital marketing with our resources through the CARES funding. So we're going to do a lot of digital outreach and digital marketing. But again, back to that reauthorization is going to be important because once we raise the visibility, you can't unring that. So it's going to be important that continue to have the resources available for the clients that are looking for our help moving forward.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think Mark summed it up pretty well. The only concern I have is SBA added the marketing in, which is great and very useful for our members, but it wasn't specifically mentioned in the statute. So I'm kind of waiting for the Inspector General to come back at us and say, you weren't supposed to spend any of the money on marketing. But beyond that, I think when you look at the resources that were given to the agency, I think it would be invaluable if SBA would put some of those funds to use promoting SBDCs, Women's Business Center, SCORE. All right, I admit I'm probably the only guy from Virginia who watches professional bull riding, but the Customs and Border Protection folks have ads all over that.
Yep, I appreciate both your feedback. I mean, you're right there on the ground, and important point, Mr. Rowe, about the need to authorize that activity so that you don't run into any problems with your CARES Act funding. I'm out of time, and I'm now going to turn it over to Mr. Stauber.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Chair Golden. And my questions are going to be directed to Mr. Strong, who's our state director in Minnesota. So Bruce, what have been the most common questions your centers have received from small businesses and lenders during this pandemic? And how have your centers helped them navigate the issues that they have faced?
Thank you, Ranking Member Stauber. Well, obviously, early on, all of the questions centered around the SBA EIDL loan and PPP loan. We're still fielding a lot of questions, as already been mentioned, about those in terms of receiving or trying to wade through the clarification guidelines as it relates to loan forgiveness and having discussions about how those funds may be expanded or used more broadly to help small businesses. But now we're starting to obviously move to reopening and safely reopening businesses. As you know, Minnesota's governor has put together an executive order that effective June 1st, some small businesses will be allowed to reopen. And there's a lot of question about how do we do that? How do we do it safely? What liability issues are involved? And so again, that's really our main topic of focus right now. Also, though, I'm really happy to say we're starting to see the seeds of new businesses, and we're getting questions from folks that are interested in starting new businesses, even in the ashes of the pandemic.
Bruce, to follow up on the comment of opening up responsibly, are you getting from those small businesses that you're communicating with, how high of intensity are they talking to you about business liability when they open up?
Business liability is certainly, it's not top on their mind right now. They're just trying to figure out the physical logistics. Yeah. Again, given the limitations, we can only do a certain percentage of customers in an establishment at any one time. And so that's their first priority. But right behind that, I think, is the issue of liability. And what happens if somebody comes into my establishment and then later claims that they got ill or sick or caught COVID in my establishment? So it's very much a top of mind.
And then what does a recovery phase look like to you, given the work you have done over the last few months and your background as a lender?
Well, certainly the CARES Act has been a godsend, but even the U.S. government can't print enough money to fund and save every one of the 30 million plus small businesses in the country. And so I think they need to intelligently figure out how to go about helping those businesses. And obviously I'm very biased in this regard because I'm a director of an SBDC. but certainly the SBDCs are right at the top tier of the answer to solving that question. Again, you can't reach the federal government can't reach every business. Even the SBDCs are going to be challenging in reaching all the businesses that we can. But it is our mission. It is what we're here to do, and we're ready, willing, and able to do it.
Yeah, Mr. Strong, I think, and for the others, we know that the small businesses are the engine of our economy. We just heard from the great state of Maine that the two young folks want to be entrepreneurs. It's an exceptional business that they're creating. It's awesome. One last question. I think I have enough time here. Can you speak to your center's efforts to help underserved communities, particularly those in rural areas where there's limited access to broadband?
Well, like Maine, 95% of Minnesota is rural. Obviously, you very well know that. We have the Twin City area, but basically everywhere outside of that is rural. Our network is currently set up that we have 9 regional centers spread throughout the state. Each of those centers has another 4 or 5 satellite offices that they utilize to broaden our reach even further into Minnesota. Again, as you know, Minnesota is undergoing a seismic demographic shift right now, where we're having a significant influx of new Americans coming to Minnesota, particularly from the East African area, from the Asian area, which has always been strong, at least since Vietnam, and also the Hispanic population. So we're working on trying to recruit and hire new consultants from those populations. We publish all of our marketing materials in a variety of languages. And again, you mentioned broadband. As you know, the state has been working hard to improve its broadband availability throughout the state. It's working in some areas not quite so much. But again, the SBDC is here. We do have online capability, but we're also willing to do business the old-fashioned way, face-to-face, even now in the COVID epidemic.
No, I know that, Bruce. And, back home, and it's not only in Minnesota, Chairman Golden and I held 2 field hearings, one in Minnesota and one in Maine. They're the same concerns from those small businesses. We need that high-speed reliability. And we know that many of these businesses, Bruce, would move out to greater Maine or greater Minnesota as long as they knew they were connected for our quality of life. So I just appreciate, Bruce, I appreciate everything that you continue to do for our great state of Minnesota. You're just a beacon of fresh air when it comes to our small businesses, and keep up the great work. And I'll see you back home in the state sometime very soon.
Well, I thank you for those comments. And again, Minnesota is not unique in that regard. The SBDCs across this country just do a magnificent job. And T and his team in particular do a great job of helping support us. So we appreciate it.
Yes, they do. Thank you. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you both very much. We're now going to recognize the chairwoman of the full Small Business Committee, Chairwoman Nydia Velasquez. And I want to just quickly say before I turn it over to you, I really appreciate the way that this committee, under your leadership and the leadership of the ranking member, was quite quick to get us up and operating with these virtual forums. I thought it was so important, and I've been really pleased to be able to participate in so many more of them than I would under normal circumstances, where normally I wouldn't be able to join every subcommittee hearing, but that has been the case, and the participation of this committee has been wonderful. And thanks to both you and the ranking member for getting us up and going quickly.
Okay, I unmute myself. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Chair Golden and Staver, for this important hearing virtual forum, and all the members of the committee. I am very proud of the work that we do collectively, both Republicans and Democrats. And I guess that today is a great example of that. I'm really proud of the fact that we passed today the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act with 417 to 1. That was an extraordinary show of confidence, but also it shows that when we work together in a bipartisan fashion, we have a better legislative product. So the message is clear today. One, to small businesses in our country, that we are hearing you, that we are listening to you. And today, I believe we are providing answers to the many concerns that you have in terms of having a paycheck protection program that is going to be workable, that is going to really provide the relief that you need. And also an important message to the Senate, 417 members in the House, both Republicans and Democrats, supported this bill, and now it is their turn, and to send a strong message to the small businesses in this country. Mr. Rowe, I just would like to ask you, and you touched on this before, have the SBDCs have enough guidance from the SBA on how to use the 5% allocation for marketing to avoid, obviously, potential problems in audits? And if not, what additional guidance do you think is needed?
Well, the guidance in the terms and conditions was pretty thin, but I think that's because it's a fairly new area for them as well. I think what would be helpful is if the SBDCs could get a little more information on what would be appropriate and inappropriate. Radio ads are okay, but maybe not television because it's more expensive. Are billboards all right? That kind of information. Obviously, we're not passing out any literature because of social distancing. So we could use a little clarity.
So let me ask you, in your opinion, how consistent has SBA guidance been throughout the CARES Act implementation?
Wow. Well, let's just put it this way. When you have, I guess it's well over 50 FAQs, you begin to wonder how clear things were to start with. Mm-hmm. It had to keep going back and going back. And I think it's just because they didn't anticipate the amount of interest, or for that matter, the broad array of small businesses that you have to deal with.
Yeah, but that is, Mr. Rowe, that is one of the issues that we really need to address, because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. We do not know if we're going to be dealing with this pandemic comes the fall, and we have to have an infrastructure in place going forward. And so we need to get the attention of SBA, because that is one issue that borrowers and lenders raised, the lack of clarity, confusion when they were issuing some of the rules. And the fact that we passed this legislation today is a reflection of the fact that they rushed into issuing rules that were not well thought out and created, in so many instances, problems. So I would like to ask my next question to Mr. Delay. On April 2nd, the Small Business Administration released an interim final rule which allows seasonal businesses to calculate their Paycheck Protection Program loans by the number of employees during peak season instead of the lower off-season number. Can you share the effect this rule change had on your clients?
Yes, thank you for that question. And then it's the challenge that we had with small businesses with the PPP program and the seasonality was that there were two sets of rules. As you said, the first time PPP rolled out, they fixed a certain time window, then they changed that time window, and the PPP system was overloaded, so lenders weren't allowing people to go back and recalculate if they had already submitted under the prior seasonal time window. So it was a real problem for small businesses, and even the new time window doesn't necessarily fit. You know, we have winter seasonal businesses, summer seasonal businesses. It would have been better if they had just said, pick a 12-week window that fits your highest payroll requirements for your business and use that to calculate your amount from PPP. That's what would have been more helpful had it come out that way.
Thank you. I see that my time has expired. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Next up, we will hear from Ms. Davids from Kansas. You're up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Golden, and thank you to Chairwoman Velasquez. I associate myself with Chairman Golden's remarks. Appreciate all the hard work you've been putting in here, getting us up and going. The small business development centers are absolutely a vital resource partner for our small businesses under normal circumstances, and I think even more so right now during this pandemic. And the SBDC that primarily serves the Kansas 3rd District that I represent is actually located in my alma mater, Johnson County Community College. And it's been incredibly helpful to small businesses in my community in recent months. And as small business owners have contended with evolving stay-at-home policies, the federal loan program applications, I know our local SBDC has been providing some of the crucial answers and guidance. But our small businesses now more than ever need that kind of support, and it's not going to stop. That's going to keep going forward. And so I'm wondering about Mr. Delisle and Mr. Strong. I imagine you've seen a transition over the course of these months in the kinds of needs and questions that our small business owners are coming to SBDCs with. And I guess I'm curious, what are the main kinds of services and questions that SBDCs are fielding currently? And what do you see as becoming the emerging issues going forward? And then we'll get through those two, and then I'll follow up.
Okay. I think Bruce Strong mentioned this. I mean, originally it was a lot of EIDL and PPP access questions, but now we are in that mode where we're trying to kind of help them reopen. And I'm not sure if I said this on this call or a different call, but I don't think there's a single business model that doesn't need to change. And, our clients here are a great example from Farmington. I'm trying to kind of figure out a new business model and a new cash flow and new projections. So that's really what we're helping folks with right now, is digging into their specific issues and looking at their cost structure, their cost flow, what the changes are going to mean, how can they diversify, offer different products or services that will fit this kind of new reality for us. So that's really where we're focusing most of our attention right now. And things are coming up every week because it's such a changing environment on, how do you access the PPE, how do you kind of put that into your operations and those kinds of things. So that's really kind of the focus of our advisors' work right now.
And I'll just add one nuance to that. I won't reiterate or repeat what's already been said, but something else that's come up as we're going through this analysis of these businesses and trying to reinvent themselves, and frankly, even determining whether or not they should reopen. A big part of what we expect to be talking about is business succession. If a business is not, ready for the new environment, how do they transition out of that business, hopefully successfully, and sell the business to someone else? Sadly, obviously, bankruptcy is going to be an issue that's going to be very important. As you know, the CARES Act included a new provision of bankruptcy law, a new chapter or a subchapter. And so, again, we're trying to help people wade through those issues as well. But very much we're trying to save as many businesses as we can. Help them reinvent themselves, but some of them, quite frankly, it's time. And COVID is really the impetus to finally pull the plug, and we're trying to help them do so effectively as well.
Thank you. I'm getting short on time, and I think the last thing I'll say is I just want to express my support for escape rooms. It's one of my favorite things. And with that, I will yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Davids. And I just wanted to notify for members that a new round of votes has started. I'm going to stick with this right to the very last group, but just so you're all aware, they just now called the votes, so we got some time here. Next up will be Congresswoman Chu, who is the chair, I believe, of the Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations here on the Small Business Committee. You are up for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. Mr. Rowe, I'd like to follow up on a question that I asked you during our May 7th forum on language capabilities of SBDCs. Then you told me that SBDCs in general are relying on the language skills of individual staff members and not on official translations or instructions from SBA's headquarters. Since then, SBA has published online resources in 17 non-English languages, and the list of translated materials is slowly but steadily increasing. So thank goodness we're making some progress here. Can you explain how these materials have affected the way that the SBDCs are providing in-language assistance and the extent to which centers are still reliant on unofficial translations provided by their staff members?
Well, I think we just like 10 days ago received a Spanish language translation of our 641 form, which is the MPEG form. And that's very helpful because, of course, it's clarifying in business Spanish, which sometimes is a little different. The procedures at SBDCs. All of this is helpful. You know, most of our advisors who are bilingual are in a family native tongue, so they're good. But obviously, official help helps, and we're continuing along. It does make a difference to have that support.
Thank you, and Mr. Rowan, Mr. Delisle, even as businesses physically reopen, I'm concerned that many will face serious trouble attracting many of their past customers who've now shifted their spending habits online. Small businesses will not only need to safely reopen for in-person businesses, but will have to build up capacity for e-commerce to compete as customers continue to socially distance. In fact, the SBDC in Pasadena, California, in my district, is offering virtual workshops for small businesses just getting started in e-commerce. So can you explain some of the ways you're helping small businesses compete online?
Mark, you want to start off? Or?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that question. So you're right, Representative Chu. It's important that we help small businesses figure out other ways of generating sales. So whether that's e-commerce or diversified product lines, et cetera, et cetera. So we are working with our small businesses and frankly have always done that. I think e-commerce has just been something that everybody should have been doing for the last several years. So a lot of our businesses were fairly well positioned for that. But what we also saw during this pandemic is that a lot of our small businesses really focused on local and partnering, and our clients here talked about partnering with other local organizations. So, connecting, that's also been very helpful. There have been a lot of people that have been very supportive of their local businesses, understanding that small business is going to be critical. And so they're buying gift cards and they're buying takeout and curbside and those kinds of things. So all those revenue streams are important for us to help small businesses figure out how to maximize those.
And I just add, I mentioned one of our clients, the SBDC client in Iowa, their website, Shop Where You Live, is going up live on shopiowa.com shortly. And we're hoping to expand that idea so that literally people can find local resources and local shopping opportunities.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you for the questions, Congresswoman. Mr. Delisle could tell you in Maine, in my district in Lewiston, we have business owners who need, some of whom are speaking Arabic, others are speaking, forms of French, which kind of blends with some of our, heritage, and therefore there are, some people that can help, but there's often a real struggle to have enough professionals at some of these centers to help out on an official basis. We've had to actually draw upon just volunteers, members of the community at times to hold meetings with business owners in the SBA. And I think I've spoken to you about that. So thank you for continuing to push for those fixes. Is Mr. Evans with us, Congressman Evans? Vice Chair of the committee? I don't see that he is. So next up will be Congressman Snyder.
Hi, thank you. And I want to thank you for holding this hearing, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and obviously Chairwoman Velasquez for making the facility possible, but also thank our witnesses. We appreciate always you being here and sharing your perspectives. Despite the additional funding that the SBA received, we still, as has been previously mentioned, see the struggling with the administration and guidance of the PPP and EIDL programs. I have heard, and my team has heard from countless small business owners, questions about PPP loan forgiveness. Millions of business owners still await word from the SBA on the status of their EIDL application and have questions about what amount they might be getting. And as many states prepare to reopen, we've seen zero leadership from the Trump administration on how this process should work. All the while, unemployment remains at a Great Depression era level. We saw 2 million more unemployment applications just this past week. And businesses, as we've talked about around the country, are anxiously wondering when this will end and will they be able to weather it. Mr. Rowe, if I can start with you. Again, thanks for joining us once more. I appreciate you sharing your perspectives on the SBDCs around the country and how they can be a resource in this struggling time. When you testified earlier this month, you said that businesses were in a black hole, quote, black hole, wondering whether they would be able to rely on the EIDL program as a resource. As I mentioned, we're still hearing a lot of concerns, but many of these businesses see the EIDL program as a more attractive resource than the PPP option because of the flexibility and long-term repayment options. From your perspective, what steps has the SBA taken to remedy the black hole issue? Is it any better, or are we still struggling?
It's still no better, sir. That's the Office of Disaster Assistance, and there's just no information coming out to clients about where they are in the pipeline and how long they can expect to wait. It's sort of suddenly an email pops up in your computer. PPP, on the other hand, they've been churning out lots of interim final rules and additional regulations, but just recently the loan forgiveness application was about 11 pages long and it had a couple of worksheets and charts. So unless you've got a CPA or a lawyer, it's not the easiest thing for a small business, particularly if you're self-employed sole proprietor, where it's really unclear what your status.
Great, thank you. And if I can switch a little to the PPP, we passed a bill today that provides more flexibility. It's still under current law, the use window is only 8 weeks. The HEROES Act would extend that for 24 weeks. There's talks of other ideas, maybe 16 weeks. But regardless of the length, I feel we need to extend this. I'd love to get everyone's thought. I'll open up to the panel, but maybe the business owners, Mr. Masumechi and Ms. Elms, the idea of an 8-week relief, is that going to get you through this crisis, or do you see it as needing a longer period of assistance?
Sure, thank you for that question. So I can tell you, in our experience, we, after some discussions with our advisor from SBDC, we did go with the EIDL loan process. And I guess we were kind of one of the lucky ones where we got in early enough that we were able to get things early and we were approved for the loan. But we are at the point now thinking about how long, might we need to be in this status for, and is this enough to keep us going forward for that much longer? My guess would be no, probably. But do you have more to say, Mary?
I would just agree with that there's only so long we can do these outdoor treasure hunts in Maine. And if we're not able to open the indoor space, but we have to continue to pay all of our bills for it, we are talking about what's going to happen next. And I don't know that an 8-week support would really be enough for us.
And this may not be a fair question to the SBDCs. I'm just tight on time, but I don't want to lose this. Is, as they were just talking about and we've said before, we're seeing an extended crisis for many of these businesses. They're going to have to rethink their future, reinvent what they do, completely remodel their business. And maybe for later discussion, what can the SBDCs do? What's the role they have to play in helping these businesses create their new futures? So with that, I see my time has expired and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Congressman Schneider. Hope you're doing very well. And I thought that I very briefly saw Congressman Evans was back, but now I'm not. I see he was just called to the floor for a vote. So next up will be Congresswoman Craig. Are you with us? All right, so they've both gone down to the floor to vote.
As we stall for time, Chairman, would it be okay if the witnesses answer the last question of the role that SBDCs could play?
I'd be more than happy to give them that opportunity.
I'll be happy to jump in. Again, the SBDC can help a business with their primary cash flow, trying to figure that out. But also, we're pretty good at kind of thinking outside the box and helping folks think outside the box. I have been amazed, I'm sure you probably have been too, at how quickly small businesses adapted to the issues that they were facing under the COVID pandemic. Restaurants that had never before done takeout business are now suddenly doing takeout and curbside pickup. Now here in Minnesota, they're going to be forced to open up outdoor eating spaces where, again, they've likely never done that before. And it is amazing to me how readily they adapt to those kinds of things. We're certainly there to help them along the way. But again, some of these are short-term answers, but some of them evolve into long-term answers. In fact, two of the companies that I mentioned today, both Frost River and Woodchuck USA, stepped into the void of making PPP equipment. They both think that this is going to be a long-term business stream for them. They're not going to necessarily move away from their primary business, but this is going to be yet another avenue. Both of them have formed separate LLCs to take on this additional role. And so they're very adaptable, and we can help along the way in terms of cash flow projections and capital needs and business plan, revised business plans, all those kinds of things that they're looking for to make that switch.
Mr. Delisle, what about within Maine? What are you seeing, and what role can the SBDCs play in helping these businesses get through?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I've been saying since 2008 when I came into this job, people always say, what's the number one barrier for small business success? It's getting good, solid information on how to run a business. I mean, our friends here from Maine and Farmington, Joe and Mary, as they said, they're passionate about escape rooms. They probably love them themselves personally. So they launched and said, let's just run a business with escape rooms. And then, as they said, they started figuring out all these problems as they go. How do you really run that as a business? That's where SBDCs fit. That's where we fit before the crisis. That's where we fit after the crisis, is helping people understand how to run a successful, sustainable business. And that's more critical than ever in this model, because it's a whole different world for every small business owner that's already running. And now we're going to, as Bruce said, we're going to see some people trying to start a new business. It's understanding that. We always talk about access to capital, tax policy, regulations. Those are all valid topics. I can tell you right now, having done this and run my own small business, it's helping people understand how to run a successful small business. That's where we're going to fit.
I think absolutely. And the one thing we have going is that a lot of these people started their business because they wanted to be their own boss. They wanted to be entrepreneurs.
Well, thank you very much. I got to say, just when you get in a room as a member of Congress, I think, or, as a business owner, when you get in a room with the people at the SBDCs, it's really just so incredibly impressive. You just heard the passion that both Mr. Delisle and Mr. Strong brought to talking about, what they can bring to the table in response to Congressman Schneider's last question there. And I've seen that repeatedly as I've held forums around the congressional district with the SBDCs, with some of the partner organizations and the chambers of commerce at the local level, pulling in, a dozen or more business owners. It's almost, it's just exciting to me to listen to the conversations and the way people like Mark and Bruce will very quickly turn to talking about opening up the books and helping people figure out if it's time to hire a few more people or make that expansion they've been, considering for a year or two, or address some kind of challenge, either that they knew was out there or came upon them unexpected. And I've watched Joe and Mary kind of nodding their heads up and down in agreement with many of the remarks being made by Mr. Delisle and Mr. Strong. As we move to wrap things up here, I want to thank you all so very much. Joe and Mary, for taking the time to join us, for starting a business in Farmington, Maine, and one that you're passionate about, one that brings something I think really great to the community and adds to the sense of community while allowing you to make a living right in rural Maine. I just deeply appreciate your taking the time to join us today, and I look forward to being in Farmington. Maybe I will take part in a effort to escape myself. I'll bring my wife, Isabel, when it's safe, of course. And best of luck to you as you continue to work with the SBDC partner in your region on figuring out how to successfully overcome this challenge. And I know that you will with assistance from programs like this. I also want to thank Mr. Rowe, Mr. Delisle, and Mr. Strong, and please extend that thanks to all of your staff who I know are putting in long, hard hours right now and bringing that same passion to helping businesses across the country, really. And it couldn't be more important, in my opinion. And it's just, people need you right now. Like you said, they need clear, practical, expert advice from people like yourself. And having seen that advice being shared, personally, when I'm in the room listening to those conversations, I know what you're all capable of. You really do put together a great team and provide great services to the communities that you're working in. That's why I think this hearing was an important one to hold, to talk about not only the money that we made available to you through the CARES Act, so that you could expand at a time where it was really important, but also the reauthorization legislation that I have also authored. In case you can't tell, I'm a big fan of yours in the work that you do. I want to see you help more people like Joe and Mary in Maine, but in also every state across the country right now. I love hearing Mr. Rowe talk about the 4 R's. I don't know where you think we are right now in the response and recover aspect of things. I know we're not moving on to the final 2 yet, but I think that you got to be committed for the long game here as we work to recover from this economic crisis. I think the work that you're going to do is going to be so important. That's why I want to see that legislation passed through the Senate and get to the president's desk for his signature, in addition to making sure that you continue to get more funding as we look at ongoing congressional effort to respond to this pandemic. And with that, I will close things up. I know that the ranking member had to go down to the floor and vote, but Mr. Strong, I know that he really appreciates you taking the time. And as he said, he'll be seeing you in Minnesota. So thank you all for joining us today. Best of wishes. Stay healthy. God bless. And I'll see you guys up in Farmington, Maine. And Mr. Delisle, I look forward to being on the phone tonight. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.